Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are in the country right now. Appreciate everybody joining us here today for our latest edition of On Track Live. Our guest today is going to be Rick Patterson from Loop Capital. I'll introduce him in a minute, but before we get started, let me real quickly do a little bit of housekeeping. Remind everybody that we do record these sessions. The session recordings are linked on the NCTA members only website, so you can go back and watch these at any time if it doesn't fit in your schedule to join us at the appointed hour. We appreciate everybody being here. Rick's got a presentation that we'll walk through for a while here, and then have a Q&A session at the end. If you've got questions as you go along, I've got the chat box open and we'll be looking at that. So please feel free to type in questions in the chat box, or if you'd rather engage directly, feel free to unmute yourself, do the raise your handy thingy, whatever, and join the conversation. Happy to make this as interactive as you would like it to be. Before we move on, just want to remind everybody of a few key deadlines. Number one, the NCTA scholarship program is open now. We've got about 2 weeks to run here. Applications for the scholarships are due at the end of July. This is a great program. It's open for anybody who works for the children of anybody who works for an NCTA member company. So it doesn't have to be just the NCTA member rep. It can be anybody at an NCTA member company. So we have provided some materials that you can send out through your internal communications and bulletin board posters and things like that. And we give scholarships for both college and vocational trades. And so please, even if you may not have a college student at home, get the word out to others in your company so that we can have a nice, robust set of applications for the scholarships this year. Other major event that's coming up on us shortly, our rail car teardown is coming up on August 12th at the Alliance Nebraska Rail Shop. This is a great event if you've never been to one. They roll in two or three coal cars of different vintages and different configurations and literally tear them apart. Take all the pieces and parts off. The parts vendors are there to explain what all the parts do, demonstrate how to use their gauges and things. It's not just for technical people. Anybody who works in this field benefits by getting a feel for what this equipment looks like and all the things that are important in maintaining them. So that's the Railcar Teardown. Registration is open now. It's in Alliance, Nebraska on August 12th. And again, feel free to pass that word along to others in your organizations. We're also happy to host folks from other commodities as well for this event, educational event. And then finally, don't forget the fall meeting is coming up sooner than we know it in October. We're back in Scottsdale again at the Talking Stick Resort. Great venue, good golf course, plenty of entertainment opportunities on site. The dates will be October 14 and 15 in Scottsdale at the Talking Stick Resort. Is registration open for that one yet, Melinda? I don't think so yet. So
nope, not yet.
Okay, so just mark your calendar, October 14 and 15 in Scottsdale. So that's probably enough of me flapping my gums for today to hear about all that stuff. So let me get right to it and introduce our guest today. Rick Patterson is, in my opinion, the sharpest rail analyst who's out there. He covers the transportation sector for Loop Capital, which is a U.S. private investment bank. And among the things he covers is North American Class I railroads. Prior to joining Loop Capital, he covered the transportation sector at Topeka Capital and at UBS Investment Bank. Previously, he worked in intermodal sales and marketing and strategic planning for Pacific National Railway in Australia. And the accent will give it away once he gets on here and begins his presentation. He's frequently called upon by policymakers in Washington and elsewhere to give his views on rail service. And he also publishes a weekly report on North American Class 1 rail service called State of the Rails, which is a must read if you want to geek out on the rail metrics and how the networks are operating. So really appreciate Rick. He's got a very busy schedule. We really appreciate Rick taking time out from his schedule to meet with us today and give us kind of a rundown of where the Class 1s sit at this point. So Rick, I'll invite you to share your screen and turn the podium over to you.
Thank you, and thank you, John and Linda. It's a pleasure to come back and speak to your members. And also remember that report I put out, we do make available to NCTA members free of charge. So ping John or ping myself, and we'll get you on the list for that. Let's get going. So I want to cover 3 things today. We'll start with volumes. Where are we in terms of our volumes? Again, you guys are down in the weeds. You know this better than I do, but just for context. Then we'll get into the service. I tend to specialize in operations and service. So we'll walk through each of the 6 Class 1s, what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, where are we in terms of service. And then you've no doubt seen some stuff in the trade press about recent M&A speculation. That is the current large elephant in the room. So we'll tackle that. So here we are on volumes at the very top of the page. Coal and coke up 5.4% year to date. It was up 14% in Q2. Start with a quick story. I was out visiting Union Pacific last December and meeting with Jennifer Heyman, who's the Chief Financial Officer. And she said, you know what, we just had a hedge fund come through, met with us. And the hedge fund said, get ready because we're going to have a very good year with coal growth in 2025. And Jennifer said, well, you know, that was a surprise to me. What do you think? And I said, yeah, that's crazy. There's no way coal's going to grow in 2025. Here we are, up 14%. So we'll take it. It's good news. In terms of which railroads are growing, on the right of the screen, you'll see BNSF, which matters the most, the biggest coal hauler, obviously, up 6.5% year to date. UP's up 17, it's been a standout. If someone could explain to me why, I'd appreciate it, but UP's been killing it on coal. CSX -4, we'll get into the reasons why later. Norfolk Southern plus 5%, a nice number. Canadian National plus 3, and CPKC plus 8%. So that's the volumes they're navigating. Now let's see how they're operating in the context of those volumes. So here we'll start with the biggest one, BNSF. Operations are pretty good. What this chart shows, it goes back to 2017 and it shows average train speed for the entire network. So that black line is all that matters. When the black line's high, they're running quickly. When it's low, they're running slow. And you can see over the last, 8 years, you see polar vortexes and there's meltdowns and there's recoveries and there's pandemics and a whole bunch of stuff. But on the far right of the screen, you'll see that black line is about in the middle of where it's traditionally been. Now, those blue columns show the number of trains that cannot leave on time because they're short crews. Higher is worse, lower is better. And the red columns, the number of trains that cannot depart on time because there's a shortage of locomotives, shortage of power. So we want a high black line and low columns, and we've got the low columns right now. We're looking at trains held for power and crews down in the 3-4 per day. That's about as good as it gets for BNSF. So solid operations for BN. Now, I know this doesn't matter for coal, but terminal and yard performance is a critical barometer for network health. And BNSF has done a fantastic job in terms of network health, as we can see through the prism of its yards. There was a big yard improvement program in 2024. They basically took their expertise in intermodal terminals and began cutting and pasting best practices into their eight hump yards and other smaller flat switching yards. And you can see by that orange arrow on the far right, they did a good job. So they went from about 28 hours in dwell down to about 21. So that's a massive improvement. And right now you can see that again, that black line is terminal dwell, lower is better. We're near all-time record lows. So that's good news. Again, it's a good barometer for the overall network. In terms of coal specifically, this is we don't have much data for coal anymore. Remember that we did have on-time performance for the coal trains that the STB mandated be reported weekly following the 2022 service crisis, but that expired. So we no longer have coal on-time performance. We do have train speed, and we do have the number of hours that dwell at origin during loading. So low dwell at origin, obviously, and high average coal train speed is what we want to see. And again, we've got train speed probably a bit lower than average right now, which is underwhelming, and dwell at origin normal. You'll see one little spike on the right. That's 4th of July. Ignore that little spike in dwell time. So coal, it looks okay from the top down. Let's move to UP. UP is running slower than it has in the past. You can see again, you see the black line. It's a little bit, it's in the bottom quartile of where it normally operates. But again, trains delayed because they're short crews and power look pretty good. So it's a solid operation. They'll tell you it's better than it is, as they all do, but it's pretty solid. Now, and also, let's go back one. Similar to BNSF, UP has been killing it on yard productivity. So like BN, they're seeing near record low terminal dwell, which again indicates that their ducks are in a row and they're running a fairly good network, at least compared to how they've operated in the past. In terms of the coal network, now this is where it's interesting. UP has the highest volume growth for coal. What was it, 14% or thereabouts, 15%? I can't remember, but they've got by far the highest coal growth. So when you have strong growth relative to the operating plan at the start of the year, you get surprised. And when you get surprised, you don't have the right resource in the right place at the right time. And this is what happens. You have volume pressure leading to a deceleration in the network. So UP's coal network is running slow. It's a high class problem because it's slow because of volume pressure on the coal network. Let's go to the east, CSX. It's been an eventful year. You're all noted aware we had the February 1st closure of the Howard Street Tunnel in Baltimore for clearance work for intermodal. That'll last through sometime in Q4, probably November, early December. That'll be done. But it severs the railroad's key north-south route on the I-95 corridor. So as a result, we had some massive reroutes. They planned for it, but this is the railroad industry, so things never go according to plan. And we had this plummet in average train speed and fluidity all through March. It bottomed in the first week of April. Then we had a nice recovery. All right, so we had an unusually quick collapse, and then thankfully an impressively quick recovery. And that's for Memorial Day, and that's where we are now. So a lot going on at CSX, and also the most recent little bit of drama. Headcount cuts in management into last week. I think 125 was the total, roughly about 100 in, or 75 to 100 in Jacksonville, the rest out on the network. But you may have read about that in recent times. The coal network, on the right here, there's the little mini meltdown on the back of Howard Street Tunnel. Since then, they've been struggling to get their coal network back to where it was for most of the last 2 years. Those red lines show what was normal in terms of coal asset turns and coal train speed. they're not quite there. They're not quite back in that band. So work to do there. But dwell at origin looks pretty good. So the train's getting loaded pretty effectively. They're just not running between origin and destination that fast. Let's go to Norfolk. Here you had a meltdown back in 2014. You had Hurricane Harvey, which triggered congestion in Birmingham in 2018, which triggered a meltdown, a big recovery. You had the COVID lockdowns, another meltdown in 2022. And then you had East Palestine, obviously. So a lot going on with Norfolk Southern. However, what we did see is once we got beyond that 5-month bottleneck between February and 4th of July 2023, when one of the two tracks was open on that key east-west route between Chicago and New York, we saw a fairly good period of improving operating momentum in the back half of 23. That continued all the way through 2024, and they exited 2024 in very good shape, the best shape they've been in for years. They come off the boil somewhat in 2025. You can see velocity here a bit lower than where it was in the back half of 2024. They were hit by polar vortex. Sorry, they were hit by some Arctic blast. They were hit by flooding a couple of times, but it feels like they're not quite at the top of their game, but they're not far below it. Trains holding for cruise and power. Again, they were running 4 or 5 a day last year. Now they're up 7 or 8. Again, not a big difference, but again, not at their best, but we'll see what happens. Here's coal. Now, the good news for you guys is their coal network looks better than their overall network. You can see average train speed is almost 21 miles an hour. That's better than where it was in all 2023, in all 2022, in all 2021, and prior to 2019. So the coal trains are moving pretty well. And again, dwell at origin looks pretty good. CN, CN was interesting. CN had a really horrible winter. So they have 3 tiers of cold air restrictions. Each tier requires them to shorten trains, and that compresses capacity and hurts fluidity. So if you count the number of cold air days, we had triple the number of days in the most recent winter compared to the one prior. So they had a capacity crunch that led to a mini crash in fluidity. You can see it right there in the 3rd week of February. We had a quick rebound. So they came out of winter after that mini crash very, very strongly. That's good news. A little dip in April, and now they've been going sort of sideways ever since then. Over again on the yards, again, which you don't care about, but again, as a barometer of network health, mini crash, quick recovery, did pretty well, and now they've been drifting higher over the last couple of months, which we don't want to see. But seeing it decent, but not spectacular. We don't have any coal specific charts for CN. Then finally, the drama du jour is of course CPKC. Again, May 3, we had CPKC, after 2 years of planning, cutting over its operating IT system in the US. So Kansas City Southern within the US used a IT system called the Management Control System, or MCS, and that was switched over to CP's TIES system. This is the system that runs the trains in the yards. Now, as you'll no doubt be aware, railroads are notoriously awful with IT cutovers. Now, it's not their fault entirely because you can't stop the trains. The networks have natural inherent domino effects. So if you get anything wrong, it'll quickly spread and it'll quickly become a nightmare. So you can plan as much as you want. These things never go well. And there's been a couple of notorious prior instances. One was the Union Pacific Southern Pacific integration in 1996. That was a disaster. And then we had Conrail in 99, which was the same. You take two networks, they run two different IT systems, you try and switch over, and the people in the field don't get the data incorrectly, and it's not communicated amongst all the key players, and it all goes wrong. And you can see it's again lucky for you guys, but it's showed up mainly in terminal dwell, and there's the cut over there. We had a big spike in terminal dwell, and they've been struggling to get it under control, and it's been stop start every week. Now, if you look at some of the yards, there's the cut over here. May 3 is that dashed line. Jackson Yard had a problem that's now been largely fixed. That's good news. Shreveport in Louisiana is the big problem. Shreveport is the southern US hub. It's the most important location in the southern US for CPKC. It normally runs about 18 hours in dwell. Right now it's at 27. So we're a long way from normal, and this problem can't be fixed until Shreveport is fixed essentially. So that's what we're watching. Now, coincidentally, or on a related basis, this problem has somehow jumped the Rio Grande River into Mexico, right? So when you go south into Mexico, the first place you hit of any consequence is Sanchez Yard in northern Mexico. That's this, right? Normally runs at 25 to 30 hours, it's at 42. And then when you go south, you hit Monterey, big industrial center. Again, there's the cutover. Suspiciously, off the reservation, you're at 31 hours. And then when you keep going south into the heart of CPKC's auto franchise, you're at San Luis Potosí in central Mexico. Normally runs 6 hours, you're up to 9. So it's not all right at CPKC. They are a good operator. We do have confidence they'll turn this around. But IT and railroads don't mix, and it's going to be a struggle. So we wish them well. We don't want to see these numbers. So that's the quick synopsis per railroad. What do we end up with? So what this is, and you've probably seen it before, all I'm doing here is I'm looking at terminal dwell, I'm looking at velocity, I weight them equally, and I track them all the way back to the 2009 recession. And when those two, when velocity and dwell are within 10% of the average since that recession, the boxes are yellow. When they're running more than 10% faster, it's green, and when they're running more than 10% slower, it's red. So yellow is normal, green is good, red's bad, essentially. So and it shows what you'd expect, right? There's 2020, there's the COVID lockdowns, there was an absence of freight, that's an absence of volume pressure. Railroads run great when there's no freight. That's the only time. It all goes green. There's the CN meltdown in 2017, 2018. There's the 2022 service crisis. Q2 2022 was at its worst. CSX, after Hunter took over, did great. A pause for the service crisis, did great again. Stumbled with the Howard Street Tunnel, now has recovered. There's the CN mini crash we talked about earlier. But what we're left with is 3 green and 3 yellow, and the yellow ones are pretty good. 5% for Norfolk Southern, 4% for CN, and that -1, of course, is the current IT issue we just discussed. So the industry is in pretty good shape compared to how it normally is. That's a big caveat, right? They're in pretty good shape compared to how they normally run. It's a low bar, but we'll take it. So that's service, and I'm going to wrap up on M&A again. We had the Trains magazine article a few weeks ago asking UP CEO Jim Venner if he thought a big transcontinental merger would benefit UP. And of course, when you say to a CEO, would getting bigger and having more market power be good for you? Of course, the answer is yes. And because he said yes, he's been asked at every subsequent public appearance, and he keeps saying, of course it would. Now we did try and do a little bit of a tidy up at a conference a few weeks ago. He said what he meant was that yes, it's good for us if it happens, but there's a big difference between wishing for it and actually trying to make it happen, given the regulatory hurdles involved. The conventional wisdom in M&A is that we're probably done with the current six railroads. If there is another round of mergers, it would be UP acquiring CSX and BNSF acquiring Norfolk Southern. The reason that pairing is talked about is because BN and NS collaborate extensively on the JB Hunt business. So that's why those pairings are how they are. And then the final round would be the UP-CSX combination acquiring CPKC, and then Canadian National acquiring BNNS. The reason it's a CN acquisition, even though it's much smaller, is because CN used to be a Crown corporation, which means, and there's a statute on the books in Canada that says CP by law must always remain a Canadian headquartered company. So any merger involving CN means CN has to be the acquirer by Canadian law. So that's always been the end game. Now, what will it take to get there? So we all lived through the CP-KCS merger a couple of years ago. We saw how the STB operated. Another merger would be different and more difficult. The CPKC merger had an exemption. It was done under the 2000 version of the merger rules, which had two things that then appear in the 2001 version of the rules, which makes a merger even more difficult. Any future merger would need to satisfy the STB's enhanced competition test. What that means is that any merger must be able to make the case it will enhance rail-to-rail competition. We had Marty Oberman on a call a few weeks ago discussing what all this means. And in that discussion, I won't attribute this to his comments, but what came out of that conversation was that even though this is an extremely high bar, the enhanced competition test, there may be a situation where if the railroads can improve competition with truck and at the same time improve service to customers in a merger, those two things, the combination of those two things may get them over the enhanced competition test, even though the wording is that it's rail-to-rail competition. But it's a high bar, but it is surmountable. And the second thing that's different is that in CPKCS, the STB was not allowed under the old rules to consider downstream effects, which is fancy words for would this trigger other mergers? This would trigger other mergers. If UP makes a bid for CSX, I think within a week you'd see BNSF announce a planned acquisition of Norfolk Southern, just because you can't have BN and NS running interchanges while UP-CSX runs east-west without them. It's a competitive disadvantage which they wouldn't stand for. So that means that there will either be two mega mergers or none. And the third thing, and this came out of that call with Marty a month ago, that it didn't occur to me, but it's a great point. When you had Union Pacific acquiring Southern Pacific in 1996, the STB allocated trackage rights to BN. When you had BN acquiring Santa Fe the prior year, the STB acquired trackage rights to UP. So if we do that again on a massive scale, you again have a bit of a trackage rights allocation nightmare where the STB has to go around and allocate trackage rights in certain locations to try and enhance competitive balance. Picking commercial winners and losers is not something they like to do or even comfortable with, but they would have no choice. So there would be a reluctance on the STB's part to approve a merger, I think, because of this trackage rights issue. So that's where we are. You know, what it all means at the end of the day is for any further mergers to occur, a lot of stars have to line up. and it's a long shot. Is it possible? Sure. Will someone try it at some point in the future? Absolutely. Railroads have been unable to grow for decades. So they've used every trick in the book to grow shareholder value apart from growth. We saw massive M&A between the stakes actually 1980 and 2 years ago. We saw leveraging pricing power from 2004 through up until about 6 years ago. We focus on operating ratio. Now we've got a lot of big share buybacks, for example, but it's almost as if they've avoided the hard thing, which is grow volumes. So ideally, if it was up to me, there'd be no more mergers, and they'd be forced to confront growth and get service right and do it. But if we see another wave of mergers, then get ready, because you'll see massive service disruption. We'll be terrified about IT cutovers, and then you won't have stable operating platforms for 3 or 4 years. And at that point, we'll start talking about, can they grow volumes again or not? So that's all I had to say in terms of prepared remarks, but I'm happy to take any questions, John.
Thank you, Rick. Excellent presentation. We've already got one question from the group, and of course I've got a few racked up as well. But let's take Steve Hook's question first. Can you comment on Class 1 CapEx plans for their respective coal spaces?
Not really, no. Well, CapEx in general, the railroads see an economic environment that's fairly muted. Even though we've got some growth this year, they realize that with the tariff influence, demand is likely to get worse, not better. So they've been reining in CapEx. So you'll see capital spending for most of the Class 1s either flat or down year over year in 2025. And there's always huge shareholder pressure to minimize CapEx to boost share buybacks and dividends. So again, you got a natural headwind on CapEx. And frankly, I haven't dug into the subsets of CapEx that influence coal, so I don't know the answer to that one.
I think you kind of kicked off the presentation today, noting that the uptick in coal was probably a surprise to a lot of people, including the railroads. And hasn't that uptick in coal really kind of filled in softness in the intermodal section, where they are maybe starting to feel some of the effects of the trade wars and so forth?
Yeah, intermodal's been a roller coaster. All right, so we had pre-shipping ahead of the Canadian Railroad strike last year. We had pre-shipping through the West Coast to offset the East Coast ILA strike that was well telegraphed. We had pre-shipping in imports to get ahead of Trump tariffs after Inauguration Day. We had the crazy high 145% tariff on China. Then that was reduced. Then we had a catch-up shipping. So intermodal's been all over the map. So not really is the honest answer. Intermodal's been more strength than weakness. Coal also runs over different tracks. Obviously, in the Powder River Basin, nothing else moves in that area, so they've got excess capacity anyway. So there's no need for CapEx in the PRB. They've been, thinking about shutting down tracks, not expanding capacity. So there's no CapEx required there. They've got enough locomotives, so they can handle more coal without materially more CapEx. I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, and I think another aspect, back to Steve's question on CapEx. I mean, how do you think the railroads are viewing this unexpected uptick in coal volumes? Are they viewing it as something that, well, coal is going to be around a lot longer than we thought it was going to be because of all the stuff that's going on out there? Maybe we should invest more CapEx, or do you think they're more prone to just see this as a blip?
The latter. I don't think they're going to spend money on coal, to be honest. I think the Trump administration is trying to revitalize coal. Obviously, you guys know that better than I do. But I think at the end of the day, there's a view that solar and wind and renewables have become sufficiently cheap that at the end of the day, they're going to keep taking share in terms of power. It may temporarily pause or take a back step under the Trump 2.0 administration, but after that, I think we march onwards in terms of a lower coal contribution to power generation. So the railroads are not going to spend material amount of capex on a 2 or 3 year blip, and that's just the way they see it, I think.
Right, understood. You mentioned before, remind everybody the chat box is open if you'd like to put in some questions there or unmute yourself and join the conversation. That's fine. You mentioned that growth is the one thing that they haven't tried. I know after getting beat up significantly over precision scheduled railroading over the last massive meltdown and all that kind of stuff, there was a lot of discussion about pivot to growth. Is that still going on, or what do you think is the opinion in the C-suites now?
Yeah, I'm starting to characterize pivot to growth as a sort of con to Wall Street. It's sort of a tagline. I don't know. Does better service increase volumes? In theory, it should. In reality, you've had a customer base that's been so unsettled by all the meltdowns that there's no confidence that it's going to continue, right? So if I'm customer A and railroads were running terrible, now they're running great, do I assume they're going to keep running great, or do I assume there's going to be another stumble? I'm probably going to assume they're not going to be consistent, and I'm going to keep most of my freight on truck or ocean. So there needs to be they need to build a track record of consistent service that lasts for years, right? Before any pivot to growth occurs. So we can't afford another meltdown. Things like the CSX stumble in March, the current CPKC thing, they're sort of, they don't ruin the track record, but they're not helpful.
Right.
So can they grow with better service? Yet to be determined. It will require another 2 or 3 or 4 more years of service consistency. It will require the absence of a meltdown, and at that time, you may see them win more volumes. But can they do that? I'm skeptical, to be honest.
I would assume that if they did decide to start pursuing transcontinental mergers, they would at least advance the talking point that this would be a key thing to make them more competitive with truck. Would that be the case?
That's right. It's actually you can build a strong case. You can say, take away interchanges in the Midwest. We can run coast to coast more fluidly. We're on the same marketing and commercial and operating IT systems, so we can get a price quote to customers much faster. We've got longer length of haul. We can compete with truck better, even in addition to the interchanges. So they can make the case fairly successfully that service could indeed improve. So investors would buy that. But they'd also need customer buy-in. You saw with CPKCS, CN and CP went around getting customers to sign, hey, this would be great for us. We're on board. Now, if you're a captive shipper and a Class 1 says, hey, can you sign this form that says you're for this deal, you're probably not going to say no. But so take that for what you will. But yeah, so what I'm going with this though is that I think a railroad will come forward one day with a plausible case that it can improve service and benefit customers.
Right. The conventional wisdom. I mean, since Mr. Vena let the cat out of the bag, and the conventional wisdom seems to be shifting pretty quick. Couple of news items from the last couple of weeks. The TD Cowen quarterly rail shipper survey came out, and they assessed that there was some shipper sentiment that might favor a merger if service improvement could be added to that. And then you got analysts like Tony Hatch, who previously would have handicapped previously would have handicapped the chances of a transcontinental merger at 0, who's now saying, well, maybe there's a 20% chance that something like this could go. I mean, the momentum really seems to be going that direction. So let me ask, and if Wall Street wants it, it happens, right? So let me ask the question this. Let's assume that the trajectory keeps going that direction, and we do end up with, as you put it before, if you get one proposal, you're going to get two proposals. Is the STB capable of handling two major transcontinental railroad merger proposals at the same time, or even one?
It's a great question. I asked Marty Oberman that question a month ago, and he said they don't have a choice. By law, they have to render a decision within a certain time frame. I think it's like a year and a half. So, are they staffed for it? No. Would it be a massive stress on the agency? Absolutely. Do they have a choice? No. So they would have to analyze it. They would have to go through the process. The merger rules lay out every step in the process, and everyone has a deadline attached to it. So the STB would not have a choice. They would have to go through the process, staff up, and render a decision under the mandated time frame.
And yeah, interesting. Probably I could talk all day gaming out the what ifs around that one. But the probably a good transition to the question Emily asks about the recently vacated reciprocal switching rule and so forth. I guess the shippers have been in for a bit of, I would call, a string of bad luck in terms of recent STB decisions, to set aside the not being able to decide anything on private rail car use. Of course, they had the reciprocal switching rule that they did finally get out that a lot of people were disappointed in, because it really was only related to service, and then that just got overturned by the court, that kind of thing. I mean, do you see, could something like reciprocal switching being brought back and turned into a competitive tool, or do you see the STB as being, useful in any way in terms of improving shipper performance and enhancing competition?
Well, on reciprocal switching, the railroads got away with the most benign reciprocal switching rule imaginable, and even that was too much, apparently. So now they're out of that. So I think where we are now, will that be overturned again and put back in? Who knows? But I think in terms of the real rule with real teeth, I think that's only possible in a merger. I think you'd have to have a situation where the STB and a critical mass of customers say to the rails, we'll let you merge and go transcon, but only if there's universal reciprocal switching to mitigate competitive harm. I think that's the only scenario I can see where you'd have that rule back in with any teeth. Apart from that, I don't think it's going to happen.
And do you think in that kind of a horse trading situation where let's just hypothetically game it out now, somebody decides to advance a transcontinental merger application, the other two railroads know they have to catch up, so now we've got two of them. I mean, and you've got a time clock to run this thing. Is the horse trading during that time clock a time where, again, reciprocal switching really is probably never going to be a big deal for captive coal shippers, but things like private use of, railroad use of private rail cars would be a really big issue. I mean, does that merger approval process allow for horse trading to get those kind of concessions from the railroads as well?
It does. The railroads will be beating the bushes trying to get a critical mass of customers to sign on and be supportive, and so everything on your Christmas wish list, that's the time to air those out. So that's exactly when that would occur.
So for those of us who would like to see those sort of things happening, we should take the now 20% possibility that used to be a 0% possibility and start thinking through how you would get those asks into the discussion if it does come about.
Yeah, the consensus on mergers has gone from 0 to 25%. It could move higher. So start working on your ask list now, because again, someone's going to try this at some point.
And politically there's probably not going to be if they're going to do it. I'm thinking now politically, composition of Congress and the White House. The railroads aren't going to have a more favorable environment to ask for something like this than they have right now, are they?
That's right. That's right. The House T&I Committee, Transportation Infrastructure, they don't really have any sway on mergers. The Senate Commerce Committee, they don't either, according to Mr. Oberman a month ago. So the House and Senate can't get in the way, or are unlikely to get in the way. It all comes down to the STB. We'll soon have a fifth member, Republican. The administration would more likely be supportive than against it. So it's if you're going to have a go at this, it's sort of go time.
Right. Coming down toward the end, so if anybody else has questions, please toss them in there. We'd love to hear them. Just quickly, a couple other things that kind of leaving the politics and the merger talk a little bit right now. You mentioned one thing that really stuck out early in your presentation to me was the improvements that the railroads have made to their yard efficiency, and not that that's directly relevant to coal, but what do you attribute that to? I mean, is it more automation? Is it just continuous improvement, or where have those efficiencies been coming from?
It's a good question. I'm not down in the weeds sufficiently to get, and every story is different. Again, remember for BNSF, what they told me when I asked them the same question, they said, we've taken our expertise in the intermodal yards, we've taken technology, we've taken processes, and we've sort of cut and pasted to the yards. You'd ask why it hasn't been done already, but that's what they said, and it worked beautifully. They also put a guy in charge of terminal yard improvement. That's worked pretty well. So dedicated management. But again, it's every yard's different, every railroad's different. Also, it's a symptom of lack of volume, right? When you don't need to grow, it's easier to optimize your yards. Right? So we've been in a freight recession for more than 2 years now. So that's 2 years of stable volumes. So you should be able to optimize your yards when you've got no volume pressure on the facilities.
Do you think railroads are going to be leaders or followers on all of the automation and AI stuff that is coming on really quickly?
It's a good question. They've been pretty good in terms of the geometry cars checking the track and the car inspection portals. So they're forward looking. They are talented. There is some talent in IT in this industry. They see obvious ways where it can help. But they're also giant organizations dispersed over the entire country, and that makes things slow and difficult. So the nature of the beast means they're often slow, but they get it, and they see a real clear pathway to improvements.
Awesome. Great. Well, Rick, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. I know you've got another group of shippers to go talk to this afternoon, which should be entertaining.
It'll be interesting.
But we really appreciate you taking your time and sharing your expertise with us like this. And thank you so much. Melinda, anything else? Just remind everybody, scholarship applications in this month. See you in Alliance, Nebraska next month, and don't forget to put on your calendar for the fall meeting in October. We really appreciate everybody taking the time to be here. Next month we're going to have Chris Martz. Chris Martz is a up and coming. He's a meteorology guy, up and coming. Has his own podcast and all that kind of stuff. Explains the difference between weather and climate, that kind of thing. He's recently signed on to do an internship with the CFAC folks. and I've talked to several folks who have been following him on the socials and so forth. Very dynamic young person who's getting involved in the whole climate sector. So we'll see everybody same bat time, same bat channel next month for a discussion with Chris Martz, and appreciate everybody. Hope you have a wonderful summer. Thanks a lot.